watching Gearz. Brought to you by LMC Truck. Restore, maintain, customize.
You know, when it comes time to put an engine in your project, most people think that a big, nasty V8 is the only way to go. And while it's true a V8 is an awesome setup, it's not the only setup. Matter of fact, back in the day, there were some seriously fast cars running 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder engines. Because of that, we got a lot of people now that are building nostalgia hot rods using different and unique engines. That is cool stuff. But the question is, if a guy wanted to put a 6-cylinder engine in his project, where would he find one, and how would he turn it into a hot rod engine? That is what we're going to take a look at. Now, believe it or not, finding a 6-cylinder engine to hot rod is a lot easier than you might think, because Ford, Chevy, Dodge, all the major manufacturers made thousands of these things over the years, and they're just sitting in junkyards and in cars all across the nation, and there's not a big demand for them, so you can pick them up cheap. Now, if you look around, you might even find that rare gem that everybody's forgotten about in somebody's garage. Take a look. All right, what you're looking at here is an original factory crate engine from GM that's been sitting in a garage since about 1965. Been buried under boxes, totally forgotten. Yeah. Now, not only is this a factory crate engine in the original crate, but it doesn't look like this thing has ever been opened. Yeah, how cool is that? Now, I know some of you purists are sitting there looking at this going, oh man, don't open it. Leave it like it is. Well, forget that. I mean, this thing's been sitting for 45 years trying to come out of this box. We are going to set it free. Moment of truth. That is awesome. It's been on there a little while, hasn't it? Oh man, look at this, we got the factory paperwork. Oh, that's awesome. Look at this. That is phenomenal. Now, according to this paperwork, we have got a 292 from 1971, which is great, because that's the bigger engine. Now, anytime that you've got an engine like this that hasn't run in a long time, either from a junkyard or from a garage, it's always a good idea to clean it up and at least throw in a new set of gaskets so you don't have something that's just going to leak oil all over the place. It also gives you a chance to look at some of the internal components to see if you have to rebuild anything. Now, I know some of you guys are looking at this going, well, it's brand new, it should be perfect inside. Well, it should be, but notice that the water pump's gone, the distributor's gone, the fuel pump is gone, and those leave nice holes for mice and snakes and dirt daubers to go in and make a mess. So if you've got an engine that's been open to the elements, you need to check it out. Okay, once you've established that you've got a good running engine, no mechanical problems, how do you turn this into a cool hot rod engine? Something you'd want to show off to your friends. I mean, it kind of looks like it goes on a pump or a tractor right now. Well, the first thing you need to do is get some paint on it, but not just any paint. Check this out. VHT has a new line of high-temperature metallic engine paints, which means it's not only going to be able to handle the heat of an engine and not burn off, but it's got that cool metallic look, which is perfect for a hot rod engine. Once the engine is painted, the transformation can begin, starting with this whole nasty restrictive intake manifold. Now we're going to swap this with this new Offenhauser aluminum unit we got from Speedway Motors. Now take a look at this. Not only is it lightweight aluminum, but it also holds 3 one-barrel carburetors as opposed to just 1. So the cool factor just went up, fuel mileage just went down. Now obviously you want to use some sort of a header for an exhaust system like this from Speedway Motors. Now, you can see that's a 2-piece unit. It actually splits the manifold and gives you a true dual exhaust system. The problem is, this is for an earlier straight-six engine. They don't have anything for the 292 yet. So, until they come out with it, I went ahead and cleaned up my stock manifold and painted it with this VHT flame-proof paint. Now, that's a ceramic paint. It will handle up to 2,000 degrees. So, even though it's on an exhaust system, that stuff's not going to burn off. All right. Let's bolt this stuff together and get it on the engine. Now, for carburetors, I've got 3 matching vintage Carters that I picked up at swap meets over the years just for a project like this. Now, the good news for you is you don't have to hunt a swap meet to pick up some carburetors, because Holley has got a whole room full of remanufactured one-barrels that'll bolt down on here and be perfect. And Offenhauser has a complete linkage setup so you can make all 3 of these things work together. Of course, you gotta have a hot spark to fire all that fuel. So we went back to Speedway Motors, picked up one of these Mallory Unilite distributors for the straight-six Chevy, and we're going to top it with these Excel Armor Shield plug wires for 3 reasons. Number 1, they carry plenty of voltage for that engine. Number 2, this is a universal kit, so they're easy to cut to the length that you want. And number 3, they're going to look fantastic on that engine. The last piece of this puzzle is, of course, the valve cover. Now, since it is such a prominent part of this engine, it's got to be something cool, and it is. We've got this big finned aluminum Offenhauser from Speedway Motors, and as you can see, a little detail painting in between those fins, this thing really pops. The best part is, it just slides right in place of the stalker. Once it's all together, as you can see, all of a sudden, you've got an engine that not only looks cool, it's got plenty of power, they've got tons of torque, they sound awesome, and it's got a true hot rodding pedigree. And with something like this sitting in your car or truck, you are definitely going to get some people's attention. So now there's really no reason to wish that you would have had a V8. You know, with all the thousands of parts that goes into building a vehicle, it's pretty amazing when you realize that there's 2 main areas that give you the biggest visual impact: wheels and tires, and paint. And with the price of a quality paint job going up and up over the years, it's not surprising that a lot of people have decided they're going to try to paint their vehicle at home. And that's great. That's the purpose of these shows, is to encourage you to get out and try this stuff at home. But invariably when we start talking about paint, the subject of candy colors also comes up, because there's a lot of questions, a lot of confusion about what exactly a candy is and how do you shoot it. That is what we're going to dig into right now. Okay, first off, what is a candy or candy apple color? Well, a true candy is a translucent color. In other words, you can see through it. For example, in this jar is some candy apple green from Duplicolor's Paint Shop series. Now, as you can see, that is pure color. No metallic, no pearl, nothing. Just color. Now, back in the 50s, all the customizers wanted that deep, rich, vibrant look like you saw on a candied apple at the fair. But the only way to get that look is to shoot a translucent color over a white silver or gold base. And what you ended up with was something that looked good enough to eat. That is where candy apples came from, and that's where they got their name. Now, how do you shoot something like this? That's the next step. All right, the first thing you need to understand about candies is that technique is everything, because the more coat you put on, the darker it's going to get, and it's really easy to end up with a splotchy finish. So I'm going to use this piece of cardboard to demonstrate some techniques that can help you out. First of all, it's very important that your distance from the panel and the speed you travel are consistent. Too fast and it's thin. Too slow, you get runs. Jerky or inconsistent movements, you get splotches. Also, on most paints, you use about a 50% overlap when making your passes. On a candy, the overlap is about 70% to get good coverage. Finally, you have to be very aware of gun placement over body lines and creases, and try not to straddle them, because this puts the crease closer to the gun and it gets more paint buildup on it. And with a candy, that means the crease will be darker. Also, make sure you keep track of how many coats you're putting on, and make sure you paint all your pieces at the same time so they match. Once you have your technique all dialed in and you're ready to shoot a candy, now what? Well, you gotta have some paint. And like I said before, one of the best deals out there is to go to Duplicolor and pick up some of their candy paint in their paint shop series. Now this stuff is lacquer, just like in the old days, so you know it's gonna buff out and just look fantastic. Also, they've got the whole series. Take a look at this. You got primer, you got the metallic base coat, you have the color coat, and then you've got the clear coat. It's all there available together in a system, so you know it's gonna be compatible. Also, it's affordable. So if you mess it up trying to learn how to shoot a candy, you're not out a whole bunch of money. All right, we've shown you some techniques, shown you a little bit about the history of candies. Now, how does that all translate onto a piece of metal as opposed to a piece of cardboard? That is what we're going to show you next. Hey, welcome back to Gearz. If you are just getting here, you have missed a lot, because we took an old Chevy straight six engine, pulled it out of the original crate that it had been sitting in since 1971, and showed you how to turn it into a cool hot rod engine that's different than the typical V8 out there. And different is good, whether you're talking about engines or paint jobs. So with that in mind, now we are in the middle of showing some of the tips and some of the techniques that it's going to take for you to shoot your own candy paint job in your own garage. So let's get back to it. Okay, as most people know, the first step to any good paint job, of course, is your body work. But once you're done with that, then what? Well, you need to make sure you got a good coat of primer and it's properly sanded to give the paint good adhesion. Now that brings up a question that a lot of people ask. Do you always have to strip all the old paint off, get it down to bare metal before you put your new paint on? The answer is no, you don't always have to do that. A good rule of thumb is most of the time you can put 2 paint jobs on something. So if you're working on a panel or a car and it's got the original paint job on it, it's never been repainted over the top of it, and the paint's not chipping or cracking or coming off, you can use that paint as your primer. All you got to do is sand it, and you can put the new color right down on top of it. That's what we're going to do. Since we sanded through the paint down to the bare metal in a few areas, we went ahead and shot a coat of primer on the panel to prep it for the base coat. Now, the base coat we're using is Duplicolor's metallic silver that has nice big flakes in it. This is going to give us plenty of sparkle beneath the color to give us that depth that candies are famous for. Once the base coat is done, now comes the tricky part, and that is the actual color coat itself. Now, like I said before, this is a translucent color, which means the more coat you put on, the darker it's gonna get. So it's really important that you count the number of coats you put on and paint all your body panels at the same time so they match. Also, at this point, you wanna make sure you are using a quality gun like this Satajet RP Digital, because the last thing that you need is a cheap gun putting globs of paint down on your panel. That will ruin a candy paint job. As you're painting, don't be afraid to move around and lay the color where you need it. Your eyes will tell you if you got a light or a dark spot or if you're getting splotches. Good lighting is a must. Once the color coat's done, the final step is the clear coat. And you'll want to have at least 4 coats of clear on so you got plenty to wet sand and buff when you're done. And that is all there is to it. Now, once your clear is dry, you can come in here and wet sand it and buff it down and give yourself a finish that will absolutely knock your eyes out. I mean, you can see how nice this looks right out of the gun. Imagine what this would look like buffed out. Better yet, imagine you doing something like this to your vehicle over the weekend in your own garage for just a few $100 or less. Yeah, that's enough incentive to want to get out and try this. So, what are you waiting for?
And now, Parts Bin.
If you're into building things with metal, you know how important it is to be able to cut this stuff, especially if you're working with tubing or angle iron or square tubing, things like that. Because generally you need to cut a fish mouth or an angle or a miter or a notch into it. And that is where a cold saw comes in. Take a look. A cold saw is a lot different than a chop saw because a chop saw uses an abrasive blade and friction to cut the metal. So you're blowing sparks out all over your shop all the time. A cold saw uses a traditional style cutting blade. It turns very slowly, and as you can see, it's got cutting fluid that runs across the blade all the time. Now this allows you to cut material extremely quick, very thick metal, with no heat, no distortion. Try that with a chop saw. Also, because of its adjustability, the cold saw will allow you to cut those miters and those fish mouths and those angles that you need to do your fabrication. These things are actually so accurate that they will cut metal thin enough to where you can make your own washers and your own spacers. Now that is amazing. If you need to cut tubing, you need a cold saw, and Dake is where you go to get it. You know, you don't have to look very hard to see the connection between vintage aircraft and hot rods. I mean, back in the day, a lot of guys were taking parts off of airplanes and putting them on their vehicles. Well, Classic Instruments understands this, and they came out with what they call their bomber gauges. Now, these were designed right off the dash of a vintage B-17 bomber. Take a look at these things. The speedometer goes to 200 miles an hour. The tach even has a yellow zone, like most military vehicles. It's got oil, it's got fuel, it's got temperature, it's got volts. But if you look even closer, you'll see it's got incredible detail right down to the square bezels that hold them in, just like the airplanes. Of course, you've got all the sending units, all the hardware to hook it up to your engine. So if you are building something that's got the look and vibe of a vintage aircraft, Classic Instruments has got the gauges you have got to have. In the never-ending quest for off-road traction, most guys have to make a choice between a hardcore off-road tire and something that's a little more at home on the street. The problem is, it would be great if there was something in between. I mean, something that would do both well. Well, Mickey Thompson's got something they want you to take a look at. This is what they call their Baja Mtz Radial. Now, you can tell by the tread design that this is a hardcore off-road tire with big, aggressive lugs that roll all the way down into the sidewalls. These things will dig through the sand and the mud and the rocks like a hardcore off-road tire should. But when you turn these things loose on the street, you're going to find that the radial design is going to give you great stability and great handling without all the road noise that's generally associated with a hardcore tire like this. So if you're looking for a tire that'll do it all, great on-road, great off-road, the Mickey Thompson MTZ is worth taking a look at.
And now, what are you working on? Brought to you by Phoenix Systems Brake Tools. Record-breaking performance that you can feel.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from a couple of guys in Denver, Colorado. It's a father and son team, and their names are Bob and John Hammond. Now, obviously, they've got two vehicles, not just one. Here's a shot of them and their vehicles lined up side by side. Now, the story starts back when Bob was in high school. He bought the 33 Plymouth Coupe, and his dad helped him keep that thing alive all through the years. So when his dad retired, Bob gave it to him. Now here's a shot of the two in the garage together. I love this shot of his dad. Now look at his dad's face, and also notice the rag in his dad's hand. It looks like he's been cleaning bird poop off of this thing and telling Bob to keep the car clean. We've all been there before. Now, of course, Bob needed another vehicle, so that's where the 40 Ford pickup came in. Picked himself up that Ford, put it together, and these are really nice vehicles. They take them out to shows all the time. Here's the engine of the Ford pickup, and here's the interior. Now look at this, air conditioning, very comfortable, something you could drive anywhere. The coupe is the same way. Here's the engine, once again, another small block Chevy, and then here's the interior, air conditioning, all the comforts of home. These are great vehicles, and these guys obviously have a great time together. Take a look at them with them lined up here, ready to go. Matter of fact, I bet right after this picture was taken, they probably took off drag racing. Now, guys, I got a surprise here for you. We're gonna send you one of these brand new brake bleeder kits from Phoenix Systems, and all the hardware in the case and everything that goes with it, some brake tools and some brake strips so you can keep your brakes in top shape in those vehicles. Now, we're only gonna send you one kit, so whichever one of you guys takes it home, that's up to you. Now, the rest of you guys, I know you're working on something. Send some pictures in to GearzTV.com. We'll see if we can get it on the air. All right, that takes care of it for us today. Guys, great job. We'll see you next week.